Hello and welcome to episode 186 of the Foundry Roundtable, the podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I'm your tame Foundry author, Drogyn1701, and tonight I've invited the Lakewood Community Theater Group to impersonate my co-hosts, Markhawkman, Greendragoon, and DuncanIdaho.
Hello!
They're not being paid for this.
Hello.
Wait, what?
Hi there, Blue Dragoon. It's nice to be here this evening.
Darn it, learn your lines. Greendragoon. It's Greendragoon. All right, so obviously the last few weeks we've been working on our 26th Century pilot episode, and we will continue to work on that, but we kind of wanted to get back to doing some of our regular episodes. So here we are. And we begin tonight with a discovery, and no, not the TV show, but an actual discovery made by Greendragoon. So tell us about that.
Yes, so...
If you know what I'm referring to.
I don't.
I'm not going in order on our...
You're referring to
I'm
the
not
tag,
going in
of course.
order on our show notes. Yes, you found a tag, so tell us that.
So a while back, I had seen a mission use something where a tag where it referred to the player's ship class, and I was like, oh cool, what tag is that? And none of us knew. And so this week I kind of was thinking of a good use for it, and I decided to kind of sit down and try to figure out all the permutations I could think of that could possibly be this. And I ended up finally nailing it down. It is, in brackets, ship type. And that will list out the class of the ship as it's listed in the details for your character. Now, something to point out for this is that it isn't really what I would call like in universe, because as you may look, a lot of the ship classes are listed as advanced cruiser retrofit T6 or something like that.
Yeah,
and,
so like right now I'm on my T6 Constitution. It's not going to say Constitution. It's going to say Temporal Light Cruiser.
Yeah. And it'll probably have
Right.
T6 on the end.
It pulls up the in-code name for the ship type rather than what players would necessarily think of.
Yeah, it's the one that's displayed right below your ship title when you're looking at your own stats page.
So useful, but perhaps will be a little awkward in some instances.
I have to wonder if it's like the full thing, though, because for certain things, the reason players don't rattle that off is because it's ridiculously long. Like the ship that Diala is currently flying is named Sir Huel Reconnaissance Explorer Warbird. Does it actually list off the whole thing?
Yeah,
Yep.
I mean, unless there's
I guess,
some... Yeah, unless like Cryptic's been it has multiple levels and they've already built the system in to sort of piece it apart, which I really doubt because there isn't a use for that type of thing, except in this very specific case of a Foundry ship tag. So
Okay, here's a question: if you have your small craft activated, will it display that name?
Quite probably.
If you're, I don't know.
Well, one thing
Yeah.
I'll say is that we discovered this doing a live play, and I was in my Sovereign class, and I believe it did say T6.
Okay.
But still interesting, and and one of those, it's an undocumented tag, obviously, and there's no button for it, so it begs the question: are there others?
I dumped a bunch of different combinations of things that I thought I might try. So I tried after things like see if I could find a tag for fleet name or species name or stuff like that. I couldn't find anything. Nothing I came back responded. So
What about
as of
title?
yet,
Another interesting thing to consider here when attempting to do this is that a lot of these are probably things that they're what some programmer thought would be a good name for it, so it may not be necessarily named.
These are the official names that they're listed under the C store, so these are what Cryptic calls these ships. The one thing to note is that the system was originally developed when those were relatively simple, So multi-mission, like
yeah.
advanced escort, patrol escort. It's only recently with the specialization system in Tier 6 that they've gotten really long.
Well, what I was getting at though is that the variable names that we're talking about are
The potential tags.
are kind of like encode things, so they're not necessarily what a player would expect them to be, because they're just whatever variable name a programmer happened to.
So if you're
use.
looking for these tags, you got to think like a dev.
Yeah. Or just think simply about it, because I mean, the ones we have are not esoteric.
They're pretty simple.
Besides the font, I mean, because that's an abbreviation, but last name, first name, rank. So
I will say, I mean, unlike the ship type, though, we have no way of knowing if they actually exist. So we're kind of trying to hit the broadside of a barn blindfolded in the dark, but we're not sure there's actually a barn.
See if it sticks.
Yeah, I mean, it would basically be, the next time we get Zero on the show, ask about the types, because that's going to be the only way to identify whether or not there are actually things in there. It's just for Cryptic to go look or to actually know that list.
Yeah.
Does
and
Zero
to tell
even
us.
know they exist?
Well, they've got to exist somewhere.
If anyone does, she might.
Yeah. Or she might know who to bug to dig in and actually find the list.
Because some of this stuff might even, link back to what Cryptic does on its back end when they're writing dialogue boxes.
Yeah. That's a good point, actually, because now that I
they
think
might
about
have
it,
these tags as well.
if these are actually the names of variables hidden in the code, this feature might actually not be something coded specifically for use by the Foundry.
From what I have observed, it seems like what Cryptic can do is more robust than what we can do. So there may be an extra step of they have to hook up a connection between what can be pulled by Cryptic missions and what we have access to in the Foundry.
Possible.
It's possible. Yeah.
But I mean, this is all speculation.
Dragoon, did you test title?
I did not test title.
I'm going to go test title.
I think people have tested title before and not come up with anything, but that doesn't mean you won't. So
it's also one of those things where title may not be the entire variable name. There might be more to it than that. Like,
it could be player title, or it could be any number of things.
That's what I'm thinking.
It's something that people have requested for a long time, especially the title. And then, somebody always comes up with, well, yeah, but some people's title is moist.
See, this is why we can't have nice things.
Well, I mean, it could be that their player title is moist and their name is Von Lipvig.
Well, it's not something we can control. They put that title in there so people can.
Players can set ridiculous names for themselves too. I mean,
of course.
My roommate had a ship called the USS Picard Flute, because he thought it looked like a flute.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure we've all seen ridiculous names. I mean, heck, one of my Klingons is named Calgon.
Mm-hmm.
Did you notice that Diola's title is Particle Smasher at the moment? I don't even remember why I said that one, but apparently I did at some point in the past.
Now that could be fun, if you had a piece of dialogue that says, something like, this is the famous Particle Smasher I've heard so much about. All right, so moving along. This is something we did mention a little bit in our live stream last week, but we might as well put it here as well. We do have a winner for the 26th Century Challenge. It is Horient's mission, and for some reason the name escapes me right now. Anyone remember what it was?
It is
Original
Sin.
Original Sin by Horient. So congratulations, and Horient has won the Geordie Bridge Officer.
Yay!
Which was provided to us courtesy of Johnny Snowball. So thank you, Johnny. All right, and we also have a new Foundry Spotlight mission, which is Time Will Tell by XR377. It's a KDF mission. And Kale says that he is going to alternate KDF and Fed missions. I think his aim is to do one every month. It's important to note that while we were sort of outed as the people who are making recommendations to him, he went and found this one himself. So
yeah, he's got a bit of a system right now, and he's actually given a little bit of a tease on what he's actually doing. He's looking at the submitted Spotlight tab. Mm-hmm. So it's XR377 submitted the mission. We're going to be recommending that one this month. Anyway,
that's the irony.
But then Kale saw that it was a submitted mission, and it was something he really liked. He played it, and then he just basically triggered it right there. So if you want your spotlighted mission, spotlighted,
make sure you submit it for spotlighting.
Submit it for spotlight, and Cryptic is looking at that now. Yes. Or Kale is looking at that. So definitely try your luck at that, and make sure that also too, with the fact that you're submitting the mission, that intro dialogue is basically essentially your, I don't want to call it a resume, but your application for submission, that first step. So just make sure that, you're putting, you're not just like submitting any mission to Spotlight. It's the ones you want published, highlighted, not just like, oh, I think this is one is a good one. It's like, no, I'm making my pitch to Kale about this mission.
There's an old saying that goes, don't judge a book by its cover, but the reality is everyone looks at the cover before they look at the inside of the book.
Yeah. Yes. A lot of that spotlight button's available to everyone, and who knows how many people actually submit it. So he'll be, he's got to be filtering through some of that stuff. So just laying down sort of what apparently our new reality is, that, hey, if you want your mission spotlighted, just go ahead and hit the button.
And I will say,
it's a great new reality.
To be honest, that's part of the way Brandon used to do it. So, if
I was going to say, we haven't seen this since
Brandflex. When Brandflex was here, at least for the most part of it, that we did not have that submit button.
That's a good point.
We got it around
Brandflex time. It might have been during his time, but I'm pretty sure we did not always have that.
Yeah, okay, during his time, I think that was it.
I couldn't tell you when exactly.
I know it's an old feature, and I think it was something that came up with because people were talking to Brandflakes in a live stream about things that would make the Foundry Spotlight process easier. And Brandflakes mentioned that, I think what it was is someone was talking about Brandflakes, and he's like, hey, I want to spotlight your mission. Is that okay? And the players like, oh, wait, it's not ready. I'm not done with it yet. And that's how that came about, is that Brandflakes is like, okay, it would be nice to have a way for me as a dev to know which missions players feel are finished. And I think, if I remember correctly, that's how that came about. But, it's one of those things where I'm just kind of like trying to remember something that was said like 5 years ago.
We have a random question from the chat room. The President's jacket that we got from one of the featured episodes, is that in the Foundry?
Nope. I don't think so.
No. Well, that's sad. It's a nice little.
It's a neat costume piece.
Civilian jacket. Okay, so speaking of things that happened 5 years ago, it came up on Twitter when we were talking about the Spotlight with Kale right after he had pulled the trigger on it. I think I said something like, because he was talking about how he had gone and found it himself. And I was talking that the shadowy Foundry Cabal doesn't quite have him under his thumb yet. And a lot of folks are probably not going to remember the whole thing about the shadowy Foundry Cabal. So basically what it was, if I remember it correctly, there was a big fight right about the time we started the show on rewards for Foundry missions. Specifically, they removed fleet marks as a reward for Foundry missions. So we had that for a little while. And a lot of people got very heated on it over the forums. And as I recall, somebody accused us, basically, a certain section of Foundry authors, of being this sort of shadowy Foundry Cabal who had some sort of control over what Cryptic did, which of course was completely ridiculous.
Well, see, one thing I've learned over the years with the forums is that people who dislike decisions that the devs have made will often try to claim that the devs are listening to a specific subset of the player base rather than
Whatever
Another
interest
specific
is.
subset
rather
of the
than
player
them.
base,
Yeah.
but one
well,
that they
no,
represent as
it
the
says
masses.
that what it's trying to what people usually trying to say is that the devs are only listening to this one subset of the player base when making certain decisions and basically ignoring everyone else, when in reality some of the things that people have tried claiming were done like this actually did not in any way, shape, or form benefit the subset of the player base that is blamed for it.
And this was definitely one of those cases. I mean, this was not anything to do with anything that was player requested or anything like that. You know, we never had any influence over Cryptic or anything like that. So it was a bit silly, but we took it and ran with it a little bit.
Well, another
the
one
only
is,
thing that is accurate is, you know, we do the goat sacrifices. So
Oh yeah.
another one that's often been used as a scapegoat by people on the forums is trying to claim that nerfs to ship things are driven by a desire to balance PvP when, let's face it, Cryptic doesn't care about PvP.
They kind of do a little bit. So it's a lower priority, but they actually have in the past justified balancing decisions based on some PvP stuff. It's just basically a lower priority.
For them to balance something because it's out of whack in PvP, it has to be something like insanely over the top. Like plasma explosions that would do 10,000 damage directly to hull, straight through shields, completely ignoring the shields. Thing is, though, that one wasn't entirely driven by PvP because at the time, that was also part of the DPS metagame, which would allow people to, say, you know, vaporize Borg tactical cubes without even dropping their shields.
the DPS meta, of course, is probably more the primary mover of balance changes.
Although the subnucleonic beam, the proposed changes and then what we ultimately got during the space balance revamp, that was driven mostly by PvP. Because subnucleonic beam by itself isn't that useful in PvE, but it's essential in PvP to help balance that experience.
That's true.
So especially
also,
with the competitive queues actually gaining some traction, having people playing them, PvP does feature in STO to a greater degree now than it has before. But it's just taking in balance. PvE does get the higher priority.
The greater part of the game, the more people participating.
Certainly, there aren't a
Another thing to remember with subnucleonic beam, though, is that there are NPCs in the game that do use it.
Well, they use it, but it's not essential to tackling big challenges because mostly you just want to just keep increasing your DPS until they vaporize.
Well, there are actually some enemies in the game that do have powerful defensive abilities that you can make go away. Poof.
I do like to do that on occasion. Okay, so moving along. We have some new ships were added. We have the Miracle Worker cruisers. Let's see, Duncan, are you still in the Foundry?
Yep, I'm still in the Foundry. You've lost me now. I'm stuck here.
We'll never get him out.
Yep. So I'm in my little hermit shell.
The Miracle Worker cruisers. Do we have like all of them?
I believe so. I'm just double checking on the Romulan one. We have the Federation and the Klingon. So I'm just double checking to make sure that we have the Romulan.
Do we have it where it's like one entry and you can just customize it with the different parts? Or
yep, all three are in there, and they're fully customizable between all their variants.
Fantastic.
Try looking up Sir Huel Reconnaissance Warbird.
The what one?
Hold on, let me pull up the main.
If it starts with an S and it isn't the scimitar, then it's not in there. Unless you're talking about a class.
It's the Romulan equivalent of the I forget what the thing's called. Anyways, Reconnaissance Explorer Warbird.
Okay, so
what was that?
One of the science ones.
Yeah. It's the one that looks like a Dakir.
With the sort of like ring drive a little bit. I think.
Yeah,
I'm
pretty sure we got that. We used one for the 26th century.
Yeah.
So
cool.
Okay. Yeah, we do have those.
So the naming was updated, but the one thing to keep in mind is that there's still variation. So, yeah, sometimes it's named based on the overall class. Sometimes it's named based on the specific name of a hull variant. So you just got to search around for that a little bit. But I believe we do have that Romulan ship.
Cool.
Let's see. I have an entry in my notes that says Discovery ships were relabeled.
Yeah, because we actually had the major Discovery ships, Sarcophagus, the Crossfield, and the Walker in the Foundry already, but they were under different names and pretty hard to find. So Sutherland was the one who actually identified that, hey, we actually got these after a few days after a patch. So now we have them. They're easy to find. And we also have the Sarcophagus Hangar Pet, that little Discovery era Klingon Raider.
Yeah.
Cool.
Funky little insect-looking thing.
And
Which would be great for an alien fighter.
I've already done that. I made it a pirate fighter.
All right, so let's see. We also have they have started a new code branch on Twitter, so obviously they're readying that tribble, not Twitter. Another T word. So obviously they're readying that for big new content drops.
And as we all know,
for the expansion in the summer.
Yeah, who knows?
The timing will be right.
Also, as we all know, big new code branch means Foundry downtime.
But last time the Foundry downtime was not perceptible, so
it was very quick last time. Yeah. But I would say if we're getting ready for a major content release, which I mean we know is coming in a couple of months here, so I always expect downtime.
Also, if the Foundry is up after your game has downloaded a large patch, it might be a good idea to check for new things.
Yeah. Also, just to check to make sure that your mission hasn't broken with assets moving around, especially on base maps. Since some of those baked-in assets, some but not all, are set basically in a randomized parameter that's generated each time the Foundry is republished. So assets may have moved, and that may have blocked progress. So it's definitely on exterior maps. Check those.
Get different sized rocks sometimes.
Or like that one Borg building I noticed on the ground maps where the exact shape of the building is randomized, and you don't know exactly what shape it's going to be until you load the mission.
All right, so let's see what else we got. Oh yeah, the 3D printing that has been a long time in the making for Star Trek Online ships has launched. You can order them now.
Or 350.
For 350, or what is it? Like 225, 250
it's
for
200 for the
one.
Unpainted, 225 for the metallic of your choice, or 350 for like a fully hand painted.
Mm-hmm.
Which, as far as I understand it, the fully hand-painted one actually imitates the colored decals you customized your ship in-game to have.
It also will replicate hull materials that you're using from any vanity shield.
Vanity shields, yes.
So how it looks in-game is how it will look minus some material effects, because they won't necessarily be able to make it as shiny. In the 3D
there's some things that influence the look of your ship by the lighting in game rather than something that's on the whole materials itself, so it won't have that sort of thing. So it'll look slightly different, but in large part it'll really be the same.
Yeah,
and it's mostly the same.
Yeah, it's a hand-painted process, too, so it's not just, an automated stamp out, that's good enough. Someone's actually putting in the detail on this. So,
yeah, which is partly why it's as expensive as it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's 12 inches and made of resin.
One observation I made about this... Oh, sorry.
Just real quick, I was just going to say, I was really expecting the top end to be like 600. So I'm still surprised by 350.
This is listed as special launch pricing. So, it's hard to say what it might be after a month or two.
So what I have gathered, because I kind of took my ship as far as the checkout. I didn't actually go and buy it. But for like 2 weeks, the they're basically saying the $200 for like the base and the $350 for the painted, that's all ships are that. And then after that point, there will be some amount added on top of it that represents how big your ship is or how much volume it basically takes up. So it's kind of the material cost.
Yeah. So there might be further adjustments, but it's probably not going to be huge. It's just going to be a little bit more of a sliding scale.
Probably.
Yeah.
And apparently certain hull configurations are fundamentally incompatible with their 3D printing process, and no.
Yeah, there's some technical limitations, like one that, because they did a Q&A over on Reddit, and one of them that I remember is they were talking about the Jupiter with its the through hanger and the force fields. They couldn't quite figure out a way to do that they liked with the force fields. So he said if they can figure out a way, they'll go ahead and offer that one. And I think that probably goes for a lot of them on the no-fly list.
Except I would say the notable exception, I think, was the Vesta, because that's a rights issue.
Yeah, Mark Rademacher still owns the Vesta and all of the variants, apparently. I don't know why, but apparently so.
Not actually, all of the variants are locked off.
Yeah, so some of the variants you can, but specifically not the Vesta.
Probably like those
well,
new
that's
G6
just it, though,
ones
is that
they've made.
apparently you can't 3D print any variant of it. So I don't know. Maybe their issue is that they don't want to touch it because they don't want people to customize it so that it uses mixed and matched parts, because having any of the parts would make it unusable.
I'm gonna go test this because I'm pretty. Yeah.
Right now it's listed as. Right now it's listed as anything for the Vesta is off limits. For the hull, anything the Vesta, the Rademacher, and the Brigid are locked off. But
and
that still leaves 3 variants.
Ones.
Yeah, and the other 2 could fall into the same issue that the Jupiter was having, because they do have this translucent covered rear section for the shuttle bay.
Okay, now I'm wondering if the Sorhuel is on there, because how would they do the spinning vortex thingy?
Probably, yeah, I'd say they leave that
any FX that are on the hull, that are on your ship that aren't specifically sort of like hull pieces are probably not going to show up. There'll probably just be a blank space there.
That said, if you guys want to preview it, I mean, basically the way it works right now is there is a button in the ship Taylor. You press it, and it basically starts this upload process from the client that you basically have to sit there and wait for. You can't do anything else while it's doing this. Once that finishes uploading, it'll open up a web page where you'll see like the actual uploaded model. So if it's going to do anything weird, in theory, it should show up there.
And I guess this is a way of confirming whether your specific choice of ship is actually something that can be printed.
They lock it off at the ship Taylor. So if you have a ship, like I checked this out with a crossfield, if it can't be used, that button is simply grayed off. So it doesn't.
You can't even get that far. So.
Yep. Other multi-mission fed science vessels can be 3D printed. I've got the button for the Aventine.
Okay, then.
And then let's see. Once I add on the Vesta hull, boom, 3D print goes away.
Ah, yes.
Also, there are a lot of things where since they have floating detached sections, you can't do those, which I guess would include
the Iconian ships.
The Iconian ships and the old Fekleri ships.
One thing to note too is the for the 3D printing option, it's just what you have in the ship Taylor right there. You don't actually have to own the bits.
So interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if you are flying something and it's like, I'd rather have this one part from this other ship, but I don't want to spend so much on it. No, feel free to just swap things around.
That's fine. So here's a question. Ask each of you guys. Personally, it's not quite in my price range at the moment. It might be, later on, but it's not something I want to spend on yet. But if I did, I think I would get an Atlas class. So which ship would you guys get? Mark, let's start with you. What would you get if you were gonna get one? What would you get?
Probably Imani's bone white variant of the Scimitar. Because with Imani, when I had her use one of those things, I decided to see what I could do in the terms of making it look like a Romulan Republic ship that was only vaguely superficially similar to what was in the movie. So I went through with this white and bright green color scheme and used all of the rounded parts so that it had like a more fluid lines to it than the standard look.
Now, Dragoon, I know you would get the veteran ship.
Yep. So the Chimera class has always been a favorite of mine. It's kind of that one I always go back to. There are other ships that I love too. I mean, the Hestia is gorgeous. The Pathfinder is gorgeous.
Yeah, it's a little tough to choose in some cases.
But yeah, I think I'd go with the Chimera just because it's not a redress of an existing ship. It's a one of a kind unique.
Yeah, that's part of the reason why I was mentioning this Sir Huel hull shape, just because it's one that I think looks really, really cool.
Duncan, how about you?
Lethian pilot escort, tactical version. I'd be tempted by some combination of the patrol escort, but it'd definitely be something unique to Stowe. So I definitely wouldn't do like a sovereign class. It would be, I think Lethian pilot escort, because it's such a tactile ship already, and then it's so well detailed. It's such a good design, I think. And the pilot or the tactical version is just kind of perfect for me. So it's just like, yeah, I'd go with that one, no question.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously, if you're going to get one, I'd pick something that was, unique to Stowe. Something that you couldn't get a model of, say, through like Eagle Moss or that kind of thing.
Or go to like Michael's. Just make it a
Yeah, there are hundreds of ships in Stowe, and only the ones that are not Stowe original designs are something you can get outside this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, with a few exceptions that are, like recent done promos, which are probably not all that cheap either.
Well, in any case, right now I'm not looking to spend that kind of money on that sort of thing. So I'm not going to be getting one right now, but I think they are pretty cool. And I would like to have one someday.
Yeah, I mean, it's on the list. I will get one at one point. It's just a matter of which pay period it happens in.
Yes.
Yeah, I might get one eventually, but I don't know when.
I don't know.
Got to do things like, register my car tags first,
So how many other things would I rather spend the money on?
Yeah, I need to get like a new computer for a start, so
Yeah,
it'd be kind of weird for me to get the 3D printed chip before just, making Stowe run better.
Yeah.
Here's a good question. Do they ship internationally?
Yes, they do.
Is that listed on the thing?
Although I guess apparently at least for our Canadian friends, it becomes quite expensive.
Yeah,
Even-
because once you
it's an American company, so the exchange rate factors in.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the website does list their shipping, and it's basically you're just now buying something from a private company. So it's not like a special promo or anything else like that that would just really run afoul of international regulations. You're just, contracting with a U.S. company to buy a big plastic thing.
Yeah, well, international shipping in general is a lot more expensive than people sometimes think it is.
Oh yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised. I think it is nice that after they had sort of a false start with this particular initiative. They had a contractor that went out of business. So it's
Yeah.
nice that they were able to find somebody else and able to get it done. And actually, the pictures I've seen of these new ones, they look a little bit nicer.
Oh, a lot nicer, because the
Yeah.
last ones you had that sort of the stepped effect.
They look
So-
like styrofoam.
Yeah, these ones, I mean, it's just like they are gorgeous with how finely detailed they are.
Of
And-
course, they also cost a lot more than the previous vendor. But the previous vendor, when
Well, yeah, they were
Better-
doing
better
something
value.
wrong. I'm kind of curious because the blog post kind of left the door open on this for different sizes, and 12 inches is pretty large.
Mhm.
So the price doesn't really surprise me at 12 inches. So I don't know, maybe if they did a cheaper 6-inch version.
I'm actually wondering if part of the reason for that is that their printing process has a limitation on the amount of detail it can put into something.
It could
Yeah,
be.
Steve Rakosa said that on the 10 Forward Weekly, that this was the ideal size to get the level of detail they wanted on the ships.
Mm.
Because if it was any smaller, like the hand-painted option might start to be less and less refined. So for
Yeah.
people, this was going to cost a lot just with the resin and the 3D printing and the hand customization anyway. So I think this might be like the optimal size between level of detail, sort of forcing people to sort of go a little bit higher, but at the same time ensuring that the quality is going to be good. Because otherwise it could be like, well, you can buy a $100 version that's a bit smaller, but it kind of looks a little
as good.
shoddy.
Yeah.
And then that becomes less justified. But if it's 200 and then 200, 300, and then immaculate, then that's a lot better for the business.
Because I mean, would we really be all that much better off if you had gone with a cheaper company but produced substandard results? I mean, maybe you could get your $100 ship, but it kind of looks like crap.
Yeah.
I mean, if one of the things that people were talking about though is that even if it was relatively bad, the mass-produced plastic models, weren't that much better in most cases, at least.
Well, I'm going to say that the first 3D printed models they had were lower detail than injection molding for something comparable.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the first now defunct company, I'm pretty sure used that kind of powdery process. Where it's like it looks like a compressed powder, and I think the way they were doing it, the color was actually part of the printing process.
Yeah. Basically, they were using colored plastic for the process, so that you could paint it after it's printed, but you have the base color as part of the plastic.
But yeah, I mean, but it had this more powdery texture to it.
Well,
Yeah.
if I remember right, the way the powder approach works is basically you put a layer of powder down on a flat surface. You zap it with lasers to solidify certain parts of the powder, put another layer of powder on it, and then just keep going and going. It's like stacking it up. And part of the reason why it has that texture to it is because you're seeing how many different spots it was zapped with lasers. And that's what gives it that internal structure.
Yeah, so it basically looked like it was a low-resolution model physically as pixelated. So anyway, it's just a point that was not as good as an option. That's now defunct, but what we're getting now is a lot higher quality. So
I'm actually wondering if maybe part of the reason why the new version has a better quality is simply because the pixels are smaller.
it sounds like they're using a different process for like applying a resin down rather than a powderized substance. So
Yeah.
Well, some of the resin versions actually are fundamentally the same. It's just that the material is stored in a liquid form prior to being zapped with a laser rather than in a solid form.
Well, we were talking to Poison Fox on Twitter earlier this week about this, and she has a 3D printer and has experience in this sort of thing, and she took a look at it and seemed to be complimentary of whatever technique they're using.
So,
So,
well, I mean,
someone with more experience than me says it seems okay. So
my brother and sister acquired a low quality 3D printer for a reasonable sum a while back, and my brother, being a Trekkie, the first thing he attempted to do with it was printing a version of, I think it was the Enterprise D, which split in half after he pulled it out, because it turned out that the 3D model that he had sent to the printer actually had a split going down the middle of it that he didn't notice, because it was just like a tiny gap in the middle of the model, apparently. And it actually printed it with a gap going down the middle of the model.
Oh, yeah, because the printer's not going to know that you didn't want that.
But
I was looking at 3D printers after talking to Poison Fox, and they're surprisingly, I don't know if you call it cheap, but cheaper than I had realized. That the prices have fallen quite a lot.
Well, I mean, the concept of replicators is something that people have been trying to figure out how to make since before Star Trek talked about the concept of replicators.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's the basic fundamental core of mass production in the first place. I'm not mass production, but automated production. Is you tell the machine what you want it to build, and then it builds it for you. And it's just steadily getting more elaborate as time goes on.
I mean, we're already starting to do cool things like there's a 3D printer on the International Space Station. Mm-hmm. So they need a part, they can send it the model from the ground, and it'll print it up there.
People have actually figured out how to 3D print metals, which, that's a lot more expensive than this process that we're talking about.
So I know there's people in the chat kind of talking about the Eagle Moss models, of which I think we all kind of have a few.
But those are not 3D printed, however. So, I mean, it's a very, very different technique.
So, these are a combination of either looks like pressed metal or injected metal and injected plastic. So they'll use a couple pieces of metal that they form and then put together. And then usually for things like the nacelles, they'll do those in plastic since they're finer.
Because obviously these are mass produced, so those are the techniques to use for that sort of thing. Rather than each one of these is basically custom made. These new 3D printed ones from Cryptic. Yeah. So, plus with Eagle Moss, you can only get Canon designs.
True.
Yeah, because Eagle Moss is contracted directly through CBS, and not because of that, they do not have the ability to get permission to do anything from Stowe.
Well, they've done a couple of if non-Canon designs. They kind of do them in limited runs.
Yeah. What was it? They did the Titan, right?
They did the Titan. They did the Luna class, and then they also did the Vesta.
Yeah.
Again,
I think there was a petition going around to get them to do the Odyssey, but I don't think it took.
No, it couldn't reach its goal of signatures, so it kind of fell apart.
The thing with it though is that for them to get Stowe designs, they need to negotiate a contract, blah blah blah.
Yeah, and the question is always going to be.
Hopefully, Perfect World would be amenable to that.
Yeah, and it's probably just a question of economy of scale, because when you do something like this, you do want to run this as a large automated process for as long as possible, because you can't do a custom one-off like you can with 3D printing.
Yeah, so injection molding. The cost
you got to make sure
that
people are going to buy
making the mold is exceptionally high.
Yeah, I actually did a little bit of research on this when the subject was coming up on the forums, and it's between $5,000 and $50,000 for retooling a injection molding operation.
Really?
This is because they actually make a solid metal mold for the things, and it needs to be like highly detailed, like top quality metal, so that you actually have a mold that you can just stamp things day in, day out for weeks at a time.
Yeah, and that's how you bring the cost of each item down considerably. And it's just that's kind of the context I have for people who are complaining about the cost, to the extent of well, my Warhammer miniatures are so much cheaper. Why is this a problem? This is a custom one-off operation, and if you did that with the same technology as you have with the standard, toy manufacturer, these would cost $5,000.
And one thing people don't think about is that, yes, there are millions of custom Warhammer figures. You don't buy custom Warhammer figures from the manufacturer. You buy pieces, and then you assemble them the way you want them to look. Then you paint them, because Warhammer typically doesn't sell them painted either.
Nope. And that's kind of the fun of it. But anyway, though, getting back to the Foundry is just that.
Yes.
This is, we don't have the ability to port these over to the Foundry, but I mean, just get the ship in game. And if you want to print off something that's related to the Foundry that you don't personally fly, I mean, you could pretty much do it just by getting, a base ship from the C-Store, depending on what it is. But
That's
you
an
don't have to
interesting
buy a
question.
full pack. Yeah, I mean,
Is there any Foundry authors out there that would want to do a 3D print of their of ship from their Foundry mission?
Yeah, so long as they have a version of it in game, then, or the ability to customize it appropriately, even if they can't use it. So, just having appropriate C-Store parts, just equipped and tailored.
I can think of a couple ships that have featured in my mission that would be cool. I mean, I had one that's, the Bismarck from Sink the Bismarck was an Odyssey class, and obviously the Odyssey class is quite cool. So, that would have been on my list.
I just thought of something that I would like to have a 3D printed model of, but it's not a ship. It's Beta Station.
No, that's one thing they were asked about was other things than ships. And I think they essentially said that that was something they weren't focused on. They really wanted to do ships first before even thinking about anything else like player characters.
Well, they did they did address the question on the live stream, and it's basically that player characters is a completely different ballgame with getting the right level of detail and sorting out the customization and working through all that. So it's basically, just because this happened doesn't necessarily mean player characters more likely. It might take even more technological development to actually get to the point where that's feasible.
Yeah, plus there's a whole lot more parts to a player character than there are to a ship.
And you got the tailor too with the slider adjustments.
Yeah, I mean that's it. I think it would be a much more complicated process.
And also stuff like Beta Station, the method for converting the in-game assets to a 3D printable model is completely different than taking a customized ship, because it's not even stored in the game code the same way.
And there's also probably a lot of features on characters right now through hairstyles and certain customization parts that would not hold up to actually being made out of plastic.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, just like to take a look at Diola's costume and look at the little cables and stuff that are hanging off of her sleeves. Good luck getting the 3D printing process to actually print those little tiny cables.
Yeah. Strands of hair, ears, so easy to snap off, fingers.
Eyeglass frames. Oh, the cable sticking out of Starbucks' head.
Yeah. And what do you do if something's clipping? So, I would not expect characters to come anytime soon. So, enjoy the ship printing.
Learn how to sculpt with clay.
Maybe if they were to refine the 3D printing process to have a higher level of detail, because one of the things that we mentioned before is that part of the thing with this process versus the previous process is that it has a higher resolution when it prints things. So increasing that further might allow them to make decent character models.
But the most immediate way to do that now would actually just be to increase the scale of the model. So to get it to a lower scale, that's why I said it might take further technological development. But one thing I'll say for characters, probably a lot better option for just the feasibility, cosplay. You're down at that level.
Yeah, there's that. I mean, people do that. People like Drogyn here.
I didn't do
Did you have you had a uniform at least?
I had an Odyssey uniform. I did not have the whole Borg parts. Although I did see a Kobali science officer, like Stowier's science officer.
That's right. Yeah,
complete with the Kobali shoulder pads.
Nice.
And the Odyssey uniform.
Yeah, and I mean Johnny Snowball made himself an Odyssey uniform. So I mean, yeah, people do that, and they even the devs get quite a kick out of it when we're like start STLV and that sort of thing. Budleaf in the chat room asks about, or he said, I'd be happy with a portrait, like a painting of the character, and there are people who will do that for you. I happen to know a few of them on Twitter. So if you're interested in that, Bloodleaf, let me know. I can put you next to people who are always looking for commissions.
Yeah.
All right.
To be honest, though, if all you want is a picture of your character, you could just frame a screenshot and print it on paper.
Well, I mean, these are people who are are good at drawing.
I know.
Yeah,
Professional
having a
artists.
handmade painting, I think would be quite cool. I've
To
considered
be
doing
honest,
it myself.
Though, when you look at Kurumi Morishita's work compared to most people's screenshots, you're like, wow, how did that? I mean, it's the same tool. It's just the person's skill at framing the screenshot.
It's the difference between a photographer and someone with a smartphone.
Mm.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm usually the smartphone type. Okay, so let's move it along. Let's see. One thing we should mention is that I collected all of the information we have available for our Foundry Anthology series into a forum post on the forums, obviously. And Kale was nice enough to sticky it for me, so we have all of the information, including mission lists, for the Iconian War, the Alliance Exploration Initiative, and the 26th Century, all in one place, so that people can look it up if they want. Because, as we always say, people can continue making missions for any of these at any time.
Yes.
and
I saw
and Duncan cannot resist making missions for these.
Well, right now it's basically like I've got to do the finale, and I'm kind of still a little stuck on the characters on the project. And it's like, I was gonna make something else, and I'm gonna make something else. It's like, nah.
Unlike the pilot, you've got a little time on the finale.
Unfocused.
Yeah. I remember just being able to just sit down and make a project from scratch instead of being stuck with these long pre-planned builds.
Welcome to my world.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I do want to point out on this subject first is that the mission lists, I have made them editable. So if you make a new mission, post about it in a reply to that thread and then add it to the mission list. Those mission lists are great because you can link them to people as well. So if somebody's looking for mission recommendations, say, here's a giant list of good missions.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say, Dragoon, Drogyn, yeah, same person.
One name starting with a D is as good as another.
Well, yeah, that's just referring back to a pre-show conversation. Anyway, go ahead and make a copy of that just in case.
Yeah, probably a good idea.
Yeah,
just in case.
Because especially if we're linking it off to people on the internet,
you
never know, especially on a general forum, who might just say, "Oh, I can edit it, delete."
I believe I actually already have duplicates of those. So, yeah.
Good. Because I just also, emphasize that I did actually add all my AI missions in there, so it is complete. I think I still have to add in Brown Dwarf 42's AEI mission, but yeah, it's just one listing.
All right. So, Mark, you made a new tutorial just recently that we haven't had a chance to talk about. So tell us about your tutorial.
It's rather simple. I actually typed up a set of notes for what I was doing for the tutorial, which is all of one page. The mission I actually built as part of this is called Betran Survey Alpha. The goal of the tutorial was to demonstrate not necessarily all of the ins and outs, but the basic principle that is invoked when you're making a mission where it varies depending on player choices. The specifics that I used when I was making Bertrand Survey Alpha was actually to create a mission where it has blind choices where you don't know what the consequences of your actions will be. So making the choices, it'll do things that don't necessarily logically make sense because, you ask your science officer to scan something and it changes the color of the rocks, that sort of thing. But that's something that's optional for whoever's writing the mission. Because basically it's one of those things where you're triggering things based off of the completion status of specific quest dialogues. So that you are using things that more often than not, the player is only going to have one opportunity to go through. In theory, you can actually have quest dialogues that loop around, but it's not necessarily a good idea because if you... that gets into the whole best practices thing, and to a certain extent that's subjective, but you don't want to have dialogues that loop a lot because then players get confused and may or may not actually complete the mission properly. I don't know.
So I just want to take a... Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, it's basically just a tutorial on how to make the mission different based on storyline choices that the player made when doing actual quest objectives or mission objectives that are dialogue based.
Now, Dragoon, you added this to one of our playlists. Is that right?
Yes, and I actually wanted to take this opportunity to shout out. All right, so if you go to our YouTube page, the Foundry Roundtable YouTube page, and you go to playlists, we actually have a playlist called Host Videos, and this is our playlist for all these like videos that we personally kind of put together. So some of Duncan's stuff is in here, my Foundry elevator is in here, and Mark's branching tutorial is in here. And so it's a good thing to kind of check out some of the little extra stuff that we do on the side.
Mm-hmm. And Mark making this one got me thinking of, what else maybe should we make little tutorials for? I mean, there might be little things that we know how to do and we do a lot that new authors will not know how to do.
Mm-hmm. Like people who are new authors may not actually know the limitations of triggers. I mean, because there are certain kinds of triggers that you simply cannot do because the game won't let you. Like, say, hiding mission dialogue buttons based on the completion status of non-mission things. You can't do it. The game won't let you. But you can actually hide those buttons based on the completion status of actual mission objectives, as long as they're on the same map, because the game doesn't store that information when you do map transfers.
Talking about limitations, that would be a good video to have. Little things like placing an NPC. You have all these options on when to make them appear or disappear. Mm-hmm. But if you have that NPC as the subject of a talk to contact, you are a lot more limited in when you can make them appear and disappear.
Also, when you make an enemy part of a kill objective, the game will automatically override whatever appear and disappear priorities you set for them, so that they are visible during the kill objective.
Exactly. So little things like that, or other techniques like, you can make a tutorial on, the in-map warp transition. You know, obviously we all know how to do that. We've been doing it for years. Somebody new to the Foundry, they'd have no way of knowing how to do that.
One thing that I've actually I've spent a lot of time thinking about is making a tutorial on ground map backgrounds. Simply because of the fact that it's one of those things I didn't get as a new author, and one of those things that even as someone who has been an author for a while, it's difficult to know the ins and outs of it because of the fact that it's one of those things where you can't just place it and look at it to figure out what it does. You have to like run around, look at all sorts of things on the map, and then compare it to a different one after resetting the map, and it's not a quick or easy process.
This actually leads a little bit right into our last piece of news. We actually had quite a lot in our news section this week, which is Starbase UGC is back.
Yay!
Yay!
Mm-hmm.
And there was much rejoicing. And I'm just trying to remember, it's Starbase
UGC.
StarbaseUGC.com.
.org.
Yeah.
Is it .com or org?
It's .com.
It is .com.
Awesome.
Okay. That's what I was looking at. You know, and for those of you too young to remember, or you know, too recent to remember, Starbase UGC was basically sort of the hub for Foundry content. You know, people would post about new missions. They would post. We used to post the show there. All kinds of stuff. You know, tutorials especially would be a good thing to post on there. And Cast Modian, who is the webmaster, is telling us that he would like to redo the tutorial section. So one thing that might be good is to look through there and see if anything needs, you know, any of the old tutorials need redoing, because either they're not there anymore or the Foundry has changed since they were, you know, those tutorials were made.
Because there are a lot of things in the Foundry that, you know, it used to work that way, now it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Yada yada yada.
And not just video tutorials as well. You know, text tutorials would be nice. Some people prefer to read over listening or watching things.
Yeah, well, one thing that I've actually been pondering is the best way to do a tutorial on backgrounds, because of the fact that, I mean, there's a lot to be said for the quick and easy ability to simply flip through a bunch of slides and like, okay, I like the way this one looks. Mm-hmm. But, you know, the ground backgrounds in Stowe, look, properly getting a grasp on how they look, not necessarily as easy as looking at a single image. Because some of them actually flicker, so that having a single static image won't give you the full effect.
Now, what you could do are GIFs, you know, and little animated things. I know how to make those. I had to educate myself on how to make those because I was curious.
I was actually thinking about making a video tutorial on. It's just that I don't have the video editing skills required to compress and label all of the stuff properly. Well, it's
doable. You know, in the olden days, and I have to ask Cast if this is still available anywhere. Kirkfat made a giant post about all of the ground backdrops. Now, that was under the previous lighting system, so you'd have to redo it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
It was also on the forums, which doesn't seem like that's been restored.
The old Starbase UGC forums is where it was.
Yeah,
and I don't know whatever happened to those. So I'm sure he can tell us. He might be listening still.
I will actually sometimes dig into the Internet Archive in order to look those up.
Yeah,
so
but it was
absolutely
useful.
Well,
it was It was very useful. So that'd be something that'd be good to have back again, especially for space now, because it'd be good to have some sort of listing of what space backdrops do what.
Yeah, that's going to be.
Which of them work when they're published?
Basically, the answer to them is none, except kind of Zarya. I mean, space, let's basically put it this way. It's still something we're asking Cryptic to fix. So I would hold off on any tutorial until we know that
sure.
If something's going to happen. Because there's multiple levels of what they could do that gives us options, one of which, the most immediate which, is to make whatever's giving us lighting in the editor work on holodeck. Whatever the discrepancy is, fix that, and we have some options. But then if it's a broader issue, it's like, well, they actually get it working like Lighting 1.0 kind of worked, is that we had an ambient lighting source on the map that's environmental effect. We know those still work because they work on ground maps. For whatever reason, something has gone wrong for space. If they fix that, then we're good again. So, but like writing tutorials on those two contrasting ideas, I mean, it's basically one way, you got a 50-50 shot, I'd say, for two ideas potentially fixed. We don't know if Cryptic is ever going to adopt one or the other. Chances are any work now is just going to get nuked by some change or another.
Yeah, hold off on space. I think you could do pictures of all the ground backdrops and what that might look like in the interior backdrops. Yeah. Did we lose Greendragoon, or did he time out instead?
I timed out. Speaking of things going wrong,
I was watching the stream, and I was like, oh, whoops.
Oh yeah, I see this thing says friend Greendragoon has logged on now. Yeah.
It's like, okay, it's like if he's lost internet or something, the whole stream is gonna die. So
no. If he'd lost the internet, everything would have crashed.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, we are certainly happy to have Starbase UGC back, and now we need to make use of it. So get over there and get signed up and able to make posts, and start making posts about Foundry stuff. All right. So what's next? Okay. So let's talk about what we've been working on, and I know Duncan has been working on some stuff.
Yeah. So I've been trying, since we were putting 26th Century on hold for the finale for a little while to give people some space to work on the projects. Because I know, I think it was Hippie John said that he was going to be making a mission, but then wasn't able to finish it. So we'll see if he's able to actually put something out now.
I think maybe there's at least one more author I heard from who was saying something like that. So
yeah. So I started work on Epoch Part 2. I've got a full outline of that done. I've kind of scaled the project back to where I can sort of start working on it scratch again. I ultimately deleted a map in progress because I realized it was kind of a problem for how I was approaching some of the builds. It's like, yeah, it was just taking so much effort to actually wrangle into something that was going to be good shape. It's like, no, I need to build something new that can basically host what I want to host without just being horrendously overcomplicated and asset heavy. So, and that was for some of the trigger work. So anyway, I started working on that, but that's a huge project. It's kind of going uphill again on starting a new build, and I kind of just want to finish something. So I think I might be looking at trying to finish over my spring break coming up here. My next Starfleet Security, which, to give a little bit of a tease, is something I want to get done before Epoch Part 2 because they might be related. Ever so slightly. So yeah, it's basically, it's like, it works as a good mission for like something that occurred before the finale of this other mission. So yeah, kind of a good interstitial. I've already got the structure's already in. I mean, I don't have to worry about any new builds. All the maps are in. It's just a question of writing, and some of that's just the finely detailed work of making sure that character arcs are working through the project, that ultimately the characters are going where I want them to go in the series. It's kind of odd because it's a big climactic finale that's occurring as Mission 2, so definitely dumping the trilogy format for how to basically build an arc. It's like, well, I might as well take care of this and then just focus on character stuff next. So it's just being careful with how the characters are shaping up, making sure that something interesting is happening that justifies their role in the mission, but at the same time kind of fits with their overall arc in the series. So it's finely detailed work, but at the same time, it's like, well, all the heavy lifting on the project is done. It's just that sort of the getting right in there with the optional dialogue. So, yeah. So, yeah, my next mission, Shattered Relic, SSF 3-2, and it's also an ICO mission. So it's officially going to be part of that anthology because it is also a follow-up in addition to everything else. It's a direct follow-up to Midnight. And also it does have a nod to Johnny Snowball's Smuggler's Life for Me through an optional dialogue, which was a hell of a lot of fun to write.
Oh, that reminds me of something that we didn't discuss earlier. So one thing that someone was asking about on the forum was whether or not there was a Fed version of XR377's newly spotlighted mission. Of course, no. But
yeah. And Kale did talk about that, where he's going to be looking at alternating Fed and KDF missions to Spotlight on a month-by-month basis, so long as he has missions to Spotlight.
Yes,
and this came up on Reddit as well, as to whether there was a Fed version of this one, and because a lot of players don't necessarily know the mechanics of the Foundry if they've never tried it for themselves. So we were educating some folks on the fact that you have to set a mission as either Fed or KDF, and of course Romulans will go with whoever they're allied with. And we were telling people how that you can create a duplicate of the mission and switch the allegiance, and you have to tweak it more to make sure it works properly. And of course,
I mean, maybe rewrite the story, change a few NPCs from Federation to KDF, that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Well, the reason why I was mentioning this, though, is because if you have a mission that is not, specifically tailored to being a KDF mission, making a Fed version of it may not be a bad idea. And vice versa, of course.
Although it does come under the limitations of, does it actually work on the other side? So something like Rogue Enterprises, Hero of the Empire, definitely can't be a Fed version. Because it's about being a Klingon captain.
Well, like I said, I mean, if you can find a way to make the story make sense.
Yeah. And the other thing is you can do is, not necessarily make just a direct copy, but make a companion mission. So one of the things that I wanted to do a long time ago, I never got around to it, was, I had my initial first series of 5 missions that I made, and part of it involved the Klingon Empire. This was from Fed side missions. And I wanted to make a follow-up of, say your Klingon player captain was also in this battle from the Klingon side, and make a mission that depicted that. I wouldn't have been copying any of those 5 missions, just making a follow-up for the other faction.
I've thought about doing that too. It's kind of a basically kind of a revamp of SSF, of actually making a KDF version of Gemini, but it would basically restage events. So you're starting off with the Klingon you're basically swapping perspectives, but it would basically serve as a total rebuild of the project.
Klingon security.
Well, it basically be actually the thing is,
instead of Starfleet.
No. It'd actually still be Starfleet security on that one. It's just a different a way of getting the Klingons involved with Starfleet security. Yeah, I wouldn't have been able to do this back then, but I could do that now with just something completely ridiculous going on in Janalda Station. So, yeah. So anyway, though, yeah, so SSF, well, yeah, I kind of, I pulled this on Twitter, and pretty much everyone wanted me to go for Epoch Part 2, but right now I do just kind of need to finish a mission. It's been a really long while. Shattered Relic, it's so close to being done. The maps are so good on that one. Gameplay should be pretty good, too. I've still got to tweak some things, but I do some stuff on the finale ground map, which is I haven't seen this done in a Foundry mission before, but it's basically going one step further on kind of the stage magic and tweaking difficulty options. So you can adjust difficulty combat encounter by combat encounter by taking advantage of strategic options. So, for example, ordering your team to snipe someone, and then that shifts around the mob. So now you're facing a mob without the commander. So I've swapped them from difficulty levels.
Well, that is one thing that is that you can do when you're doing like the branching stories is to. I think I touched on it in the tutorials that you can set it up so that as part of one of the story dialogues in the mission, you make a choice, and then like you just like tell one of your bridge officers like, hey, we're going to try sneaking around the back side of the building, or we're going to shoot a hole in the front door, and then that changes the mission so that you can't do the other one.
Yeah, I definitely didn't have enough assets on this build to go for a branching path, but I do allow the player, instead of just giving them like the easy normal options, I basically make an organic part of that mission where it's like, if you want to make this easier, call in the micro torpedo strike. It's also hilarious because I added a lot of explosions. One quick thing. I'm out of the Foundry, so if you want to send me a bridge invite, I can actually join with a KY's character.
Okay.
But anyway, though, yeah, Shattered Relic. It also will be, for people wanting Epoch Part 2, it's a good reason for why I've been kind of delaying on Epoch Part 2.
Well, luckily, Twitter polls are non-binding.
No, they're non-binding resolutions, so yeah, I can definitely go with something else. And it'll scratch for people who want more of my AEI stuff. It will definitely scratch that fix. It's that kind of mission.
All right, Dragoon, what have you been working on?
I've been working on a 26th Century pilot episode.
That's right. And not, of course, Midas Part 3.
No. I got to get this one done first, and then I
thing.
can do Midas Part 3. I have been wrestling with the very intricate trigger work in that first map. I found out why my Enterprise GA kept spawning in both scenarios, and I went to go fix it, and my fix isn't going to work. Because it's become to the point where I am now so deep in, I am like trying to navigate the meta of the Foundry. There's a specific bug.
You have gone far down the rabbit hole.
There's a specific bug that only occurs when you are trying to do, when you do a trigger, you can have a component complete and you can add more than one object, so that you have to interact with two different objects before it'll trigger.
Oh.
If one of those things is a map dialogue, it'll just trigger once the first trigger happens.
So
one of the things I've noticed about dialogue-based triggers is that certain types of dialogue-based triggers are triggered by the dialogue being available, not based on you actually completing the dialogue.
Hold on. There might be a workaround. Okay, so when you're specifying the dialogue, are you using dialogue prompt complete or component complete?
I am doing component complete.
Okay. Oh, okay. Because that was my suggestion, because that normally is at the end. But
that is at the end. But for some reason, when you combine it with another one, it doesn't work properly. It'll work fine if it's by itself. So it's like one of those really deep bugs.
Do you have two separate objectives that are being pursued simultaneously, or is this two different parts of the same objective?
Two paths.
This is a trigger, not an objective. This isn't in the objective time.
So this is, just as a refresher, we've got the 25th century path and then the 26th century path, and they're working on the same map, but the triggers across a lot of the variables are working separately.
Now before
there are some tricks you can do with nesting triggers that they're a little complicated, but
I would just say for this one, I think the solution is probably just going to be a little bit of a rewrite for the sequence.
I'm not worried about it. I'll figure it out. That part I'm not worried about. It's just that I chased down a rabbit hole that I ultimately realized wasn't going to work. And so now I've got to backtrack, undo what I did, and then take a different route. I mean, I'm not worried about it. There are other options to me to make it work.
The simplest way I can think of to do nested triggers is to have the actual final trigger be a location trigger that's not a quest objective. and have which location triggers are visible and thus completable based on different triggers.
Now, see, that was what I was
again,
trying to
it's
do
a bit
mostly.
complicated.
But the problem is that this particular dialogue that I'm working with also, when it completes, spawns in the next map. And I have it all set up to like spawn everything in. And my plan was, I was originally going to split up this into two separate dialogues in the 25th and 26th century. And then I realized, oh crap, I'm using it to spawn. Because when the dialogue completes, that's when the map transitions and you exit whatever mode of travel you're going through to get to the Soul Star map. And so I've got to take it back. I've got to recombine those two dialogues. And what I'll probably do is just have the Enterprise J like spawn a tad early while you're still in transition. But since it's like on the other side of a comment, you won't see it. And that should be fine. It's just I've got to backtrack and redo some stuff.
There's another way I was pondering that I hadn't mentioned, is that have a non-dialogue component change the dialogue options that are available, and then have the next thing look at whether you did the first dialogue or the second dialogue.
Yeah, I mean, one of the tricks here is that I get into some. Yeah, there's a number of ways I could handle this. I'm not, like I said, I'm not too worried about my ability to pull it off. It's just that because of the complexity, it's very slow going, and it requires very meticulous. It's like trying to set up a bunch of dominoes that like do all these branching paths.
It seemed like the sort of thing that would be informative to discuss on the show.
Yeah, I mean,
like here's the problem. How do you solve
it's a little hard though to do this one.
Yeah,
to talk somebody through it.
Yeah,
it is very, very complicated.
I am sure people are listening to me talk and they're like, he's not making any sense.
what we should do though is when you figure out the exact right way to do whatever it is you are trying to do, we should make a basic tutorial where you walk us through it start to finish with visuals.
There will be nothing basic about that tutorial.
No, not exactly basic. That's but I mean, the wrong word. But it would be a clean tutorial.
I will attempt to walk through exactly how the dominoes are falling.
Perhaps a better way to phrase it would be short and concise.
Nope, that's not going to happen either.
It's probably not that short.
We can do an episode on it.
Yeah, we'll do whatever, we'll get back to doing our foundational Foundry for that sort of thing. All right, so Mark, what have you been working on?
Trying to figure out why my mission keeps failing to publish, but other than that, just like going over and looking at old missions. Like, well, for one, the Beta Rana incident, it's been since 2013, and I still haven't gotten that one fixed. Ugh. 5 years. Yeah, I know.
Well,
but anyways. That was the worst case I've ever had of one of my missions breaking, and I'm not sure how many people have had worse cases of a mission breaking in the entire history of the Foundry. Well, okay, the people listening probably don't know what I'm talking about, but it's a case where I built something outside what is the normally usable space of a map, and then the area of the map got restricted to where the entirety of what I had built is now outside the usable space of the map. And now I have to find a way to relocate it to a different map.
Yep. Building in the black space was an unintended use of the Foundry.
We do have the empty ground map now, so what you could do, if you can, depending on how it's giving you the error of like, all this stuff is outside. If you can still highlight it, copy, and then just go to your other map, paste. It's going to be in a different Y coordinate, but if it's a sky castle, then just immediately just tweak that Y coordinate up. You just want to make sure that snap to grid is off if you built it with that, because
Trust me, I pretty much always turn Snap to Grid off whenever I start doing anything because
and there might be some things you'd have to get rid of before you copied, like spawn points. Perhaps?
Oh yes. Well, you just de-highlight spawn points, and also the individual units of a mob. You just need their core indicator, or their core.
Yeah.
So yeah, once you deselect all that, then you can freely copy and paste. So
I may end up copying things, one or two things at a time, or in like small groups, simply because of the fact that well, let's say that this is a particularly complex build, and one thing that I do know is that whenever you're doing group copy pasting, if one of the items that you have highlighted has a default dialog, yeah, sucks to be you.
It'll apply that default dialog to every object.
And if there are multiple ones, oh god, I don't want to know what happens. But
so you have to be very careful.
With my mission is that I have things in the mission where there's an optional dialogue where you poke at a computer console to make a door open, whereas the actual mission objective doesn't actually require you to open the door, technically. I mean, you can't complete it without opening the door, but the thing to open the door isn't actually a mission objective.
Yeah, you'd have to redo all your objectives, for one thing.
If the cave interior V2 ever black space ever shrinks, part 2 is basically screwed. Because
also Apex is going to be screwed eons for me.
Yeah, I have a few. All right, let's see. I have not been working on too much, but Bloodleaf brought up my 23rd Century Klingon holodeck missions. Yes, they're my least polished missions of all of them, but they were all created very quickly, and that was kind of the idea behind them, is that I wanted to, have them done in a few days and then be done with them. So they're definitely not as polished as probably my usual missions, but still, I think they're a lot of fun. And one of these days, the Holo History series could return. And actually, there is one on the Federation side. It's the Starbase 1 museum.
Oh, this is the one with the Romulan War.
Yes. Which is sort of like a non-combat mission, almost non-combat. I was going to make sort of a more story-based mission out of it, and just hadn't quite got there yet. All right, so let's see, what else do we have on our agenda? We wanted to give some shout-outs to some new missions that have recently been published.
Yes.
Do I have to do that?
Yes, let's have you do that.
Okay, because then for me, I've just got to open up the Google Drive and look at that list. But yeah, we've been having a lot of missions come up on our forums. A lot of first-time authors or just relatively new and sort of underrepresented authors. So I definitely want to give a shout out to these guys because it's useful. This is new talent, people who could really use some feedback. So take note of the list, and we'll have it in the show notes. And also, just you can also find these missions just by going over to the official Star Trek Online forums. So take a look. Just if you're looking for new missions or basically authors who would really appreciate new feedback, definitely a place to go for to find those people. So the new missions out include, scroll down too far, load, there we go. Tall Shiar Turkey Shoot, KDF by Kudachi Kino, or I'm butchering
something
that name.
like that, yeah.
Kodachi Kuno, there we go. The Good Guys, Executing Justice by Salastrius. The Prison of C by Helix Fungus. A New Beginning by Foreign Bureau Pound 1794, and then Far and Away.
I just want to say that one I added in.
Oh yeah,
this author actually left a review on one of my Midas missions and was like, "Oh yeah, I love your mission," and then blah blah blah. And I'm just getting started myself. Here's my mission, and it's still. He mentioned it was still in the review tab.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of these are.
So we can certainly help them with that.
Yeah.
So Far and Away is the last one, and that's by Javaman in 1969. I did play that mission, and I did leave some feedback for him. The one thing I'll say is that by the last time I played that one, there was a reach location that was just by the fact that he didn't change the radiuses from default 0, they were complicated to the point of not being very playable. So something to watch out for that one. You just be really careful when spawning in a space map. He's got some good writing for characters, but definitely first-time author, getting used to the Foundry, so giving him some extra feedback on structure, character writing, story writing, and the length of a map, which is ideal for the Foundry, would definitely be good for that one.
Yeah, that's actually one of those things that, as a new author, you just won't think about, and then but it's something that's actually very important to know, is that whole thing with reach markers, because the default sizes for reach markers basically require you to stand on a button, and that's shall we say impractical for most missions.
Yeah, yes. And then if it's space, it's intersecting with a single point, infinitesimally small point in space. So,
well, I guess it's like figure out what altitude the button is at, then touch the button.
There's sufficient wiggle room with
issues as well.
Yeah,
space reach markers.
Yeah, so altitude. If you go off altitude, it's basically it's going to be a lot. It's going to be a while, and you're going to hit it by luck.
Well, one of the things that we discussed on a previous show about best practices for space reach markers is to put something at the reach marker.
Put something at the reach marker and turn it up from 0.
Yeah.
I mean, because if it's
or something
a long ways
interactable
from,
as well.
If it's a long ways from where the player is, putting a blinking light there might simply be the best way to go about it. I mean, if it's just like an empty sector of space that you're telling the person to fly to, I mean that can be, the best thing. I mean, of course, if you're telling the person that they're going to go look for something, tell them, like, okay, go fly over to that asteroid. And then they, see, oh, there's an asteroid there. I'll get close to that.
Our Spotlight mission essentially did something like that. He had you with a kill objective where the enemies were actually quite a far away from you, so he put a blinky light where you're supposed to go.
Yeah. And the other thing I was going to say for this one, it's just a good sign for first-time author. Like, whenever I see this come up, my immediate reaction to this one is that the author did not playtest this. So the one thing I will say for authors looking to get started, playtest your own missions and think about them in the context of other Foundry missions. So be very self-critical, just in the sense of just trying to evaluate, am I doing this right? Am I doing something which is natural, that feels good, or is there a better way of doing what I'm doing? So if you have that constant drive for self-improvement, you will become a good Foundry author. But if you don't have that, if you just publish something, you don't test it, you just throw it out there, it's going to be tough.
Yeah,
so
chances are you're going to have something that's going to impede progress, and people aren't going to like that. And
yeah,
you're not going to get better feedback.
There's a lot of things that you, as the person making the mission, will know about the mission, and you will just automatically do them without thinking about it. And someone who doesn't have that insight will be utterly baffled because they're like, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense. He didn't say I needed to do that.
Yeah.
Having a friend play it, that'll tell you that kind of stuff, because your friend will be able to tell you if your directions aren't clear, or if there's if they can't find an objective of yours, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Like that whole thing with reach markers, for example, you as the person who placed it, you know exactly where the reach marker is, so you'll just have your character walk to the reach marker and trigger it, and another person's like, wait a second, where's the reach marker?
Well, it's still indicated on the mini-map, so it's not a question of knowing for that one where it is. It's just the mechanical operation of going to that. It's playtesting.
Hit it. Yeah.
Because it's not a question there of, does the author know what they're doing? It's a question of, did they actually test out that series of operations to make sure that it was actually easily completable? And or fun, or just for this particular mission. He did tie for the shortest map ever. I mean, I like the components of the mission, but he did tie it for shortest map ever because he approached the sequence of events literally from going one place to another. So beaming to orbit and then warping out immediately was something he did in the mission. So, but
one mission I've played in the past had a person do an emergency beam up from a planet to, it wasn't their transporter room on their ship. It was some random hallway on their own ship that they got automatically beamed to as part of an emergency beam out. Then they beamed to their own bridge, and all it is beam to the hallway, do a dialogue button, beam to your bridge, and boom.
This was just the map transition. Like, you spawn in, map transition, go to the next map. Wow. So that's the shortest map ever, and it's come up in Cold Blue Space. Although Cold Blue Space Part 3 had some of the oddest map transitions I've ever seen, such as like in space combat, rather than doing a dialogue in space, which this author was doing, they spawned to the bridge map, had the dialogue, went back to space, and then went back, and then did more dialogue. And this was at the point where I was considering that this might be a parody mission, but I could not figure this one out.
One of my old favorites that I've mentioned as something that's worth playing is this old KDF mission called Vulture Wheel, where it's one of the few missions I've ever seen where someone made a map where you had a map exit that is a specific object without having it make the mission annoying to complete, because of the fact that, one, the door that was the map exit that you had to interact with to leave the map, it was actually something that like made sense to walk to, and also it was something that you did not have to take a long time to get to.
So something I want to recommend for people who are going to play new missions is the review that you get pops up when the Foundry is or when your mission is done, is actually really sort of one of the worst places to leave actual feedback, because of the character count, for one thing. So, you know, if the player, if the author has a forum post where they've announced their mission, that's a great place for feedback. And if they don't, you know, send them in-game mail.
I've done the in-game mail thing a lot, simply because of the fact that it's something that is reliable, because you have the authors at handle because of the fact that you played their mission, so you saw it in the game. And, you know...
Now, the one thing for that is that in the top three, you might, if you're using the top three, you might not see the author's name. But obviously, you know, pay attention to the mission title.
You get it when you're leaving the review.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So the one thing that Twitch Fair Theta has got me going on now is just, you know, the Cold Blue Space series, and I still think we should play Part 8 at some point, as our next Foundry live play.
Yeah. Which we're going to plan to try and do something like that. You know, maybe about once a month, that sort of thing. To do live plays. One last new mission to give a shout out to, Conviction, a new mission by Johnny Snowball.
I forgot about that one.
As we all know, Johnny Snowball is one of our all-time favorite authors and people. So
yes,
obviously always puts in a good mission.
One quick plug I wanted to do before we close out the show was for the 2 Facebook groups. Why? Because if you are publishing a new mission and you need to get some test plays of it, these are great places to go to find other Foundry authors to take a look at your mission and or help get it out of review status.
And we have got links to those, which we will put in our show notes. Let's see what else we got for tonight here, because we got a few minutes left. So let's see. I played through the Spotlight, which is Time Will Tell by XR377, and it was a good mission. I was going to take some screenshots, but actually it turned out to be a mission where the sort of visuals and map building wasn't really the primary thing about it. The primary thing was really the story, and it had sort of like jaunty dialogue and a fun alternate future. It's a time travel episode, as the title will no doubt indicate. But what the map work was good for what there was. I mean, he made extensive use of cryptic maps, or the default maps, and tailored them to his uses. It was fun to run around in the old Kronos map, the interior, because not a lot of people use that anymore. And it's always fun to explore an alternate future, because you can kind of create some things that are certainly not going to be happening in our present timeline.
Well, I mean, part of the reason why I like the old Kronos map, though, is simply the fact that you can't see it outside the Foundry now. There's one or two KDF missions that are still set in it. It's just that they don't tell you what it is, so you don't know that it used to be the main social zone for the KDF players. You just know that it's somewhere in Kronos, and there are Fek'Liri shooting the place up.
The one thing I also did want to add to the pile for new missions coming out, real quick.
Yes.
Homecoming 2 by Ricky Smith. It's a sequel to his 26th Century mission.
Right.
I forgot that one came out too.
Oh, he has finished it.
I think so. I mean, I think he posted about it. So,
okay. Fantastic. And
yeah,
that is 26th Century mission. So have a look at that. I know he was encouraged by some of his friends to make a sequel to that. So,
yep, Homeland 2 is out.
Yay!
Let's see. We had a little bit of a discussion topic, but I think that's a big one that we will save for another time. So, we had a viewer question, and we may have to go and do some investigating on this for another show as well. But what space backdrops don't result in blacked out ships in Lighting 2.0?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, and I know there's some, and it's got there's basically certain levels. So there's basically 3 levels to space lighting. It's either your ship is completely black, it's dim, or it's slightly orange. There's one that does slightly orange, and that's the Zarya backdrop. Is it either the custom or the pre-built? So long as you're using the full set for the, or basically using just Zarya plus many. So anyway, but it's which ones do the completely blacked out ship. That one we kind of need to nail down, because that can create some problems for the look of the mission. And there are definitely some. I know Gemini that uses the Sol backdrop. That one, at least when we started encountering the Lighting 2.0 issues, the ship wasn't completely blacked out, at least as I recall. So, yeah.
Well, I ran into that in the new Spotlight, which, and I couldn't tell you exactly what backdrops he was using, but they were very, very dark.
Yeah, and it's all down to that. It's just whatever's killing our lighting in Lighting 2.0 for space maps. It's just that it's extra not happening. Well, those are extra broken.
Well, that reminds me of something that happened in Champions Online recently, where it used to be that when you had in-game cutscenes, you would see word bubbles pop up above NPC heads, because there was no voiceover for the cutscene. So instead of having voice lines, they had text bubbles letting you know what the NPC was talking about in the cutscene. In one of the after one of the patches a while back, those disappeared, and from what I've heard, none of the developers knows why.
Yeah, so what's going on with the space lighting is basically, this is just sort of something to avoid, because there are gradations for how badly some maps are affected. Sometimes it's a lot, sometimes it's just the gray neutral, and then we have one that kind of works, which is worth paying attention to, because you can use it, the Zarya backdrop at least, or components of it, to vary the look of your space maps from mission project to or mapped or from 2 different locations, so you can get a little bit of variation. It's the most we can do. It's barely anything, but it's still something. So yeah, we can definitely take a look at this.
Yeah,
This is
today.
the one that basically is like a red underlight, right?
Yeah. Oh no,
Red,
Zarya.
orange.
I think it's kind of brown.
Yeah, it's brown because none of the the ones we investigated that works under Lighting 2.0. This is nothing like that. It's just that your ship has an orange tint, and the lighting is completely neutral. There is no
rather than being very, very dark.
I want to say one of the maps I used was still pretty dark, but it produced like a red underlight, like something like a red light was coming from the bottom.
Yeah. Was that published?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, we'll definitely
I will have to go
look
at exactly which
yeah,
map
see if
it is.
see if you can figure out where that is, and
because that might be useful. Like any information we can throw to Cryptic on this one would probably be helpful because it's probably something that it's going to be tough to look into. If we can identify like what the symptoms are on a layer by layer basis, not even if we can't get a fully comprehensive list, but enough for them to actually start digging into the system, that might be helpful to getting this fixed at some point. So. Future show.
Unfortunately, it would be, super, super time consuming to try and, go through it systematically, set a backdrop, publish, test.
Well, you do
set another backdrop, publish, test.
Well, you do it as a series of missions.
Yeah.
So I would say start out with the default backdrops and then just get a list of basically, actually, no. The way to do it
you could test it. You could test out 15 per mission.
Yeah. So you test out 15 per mission, and do it not as the default backdrop because what that's going to do is that's just a mix of different backdrops. So the one thing I'll say here is just that it's probably best to do it as a layer by layer, but yeah, be 15 per. So what we could do is that on a future show, all 4 of us in the Foundry. We all make one of these projects using a different list. So we get 60 done in one testing session. And even if we only do this like twice, that's still a lot of data for Cryptic to work with.
Actually, one thing that I also thought of while you were discussing that is that under certain circumstances, having multiple transparency effects applied to your character simultaneously will cause your character to become entirely transparent.
Yeah, so it's the interaction too. It's another level of thing to investigate on this one, but we got to start somewhere.
Where we have multiple, where we can have multiple backdrops, they might interact with each other in some way that's not good.
Yeah,
it's like that old tutorial thing I discussed, where when you're making custom backdrops, certain of the like space backdrop things would have as part of the sky just like opaque regions, and some of them wouldn't, and you had to figure out which were which, and then set them layered properly to make it work.
Yeah, and some of them would also do the Z fighting with each other.
Yeah, that too.
I always had to look out for that.
Yeah, so on this one, it's definitely best approach scientifically. Just start with square one, single layers, and then as we sort of learn more about how this is going, we can sort of build up from there. But we definitely have to approach each level of interaction and build up, because trying to test for multiple experimental variables without proper controls is definitely not a good thing. So just keep it simple. No.
You change one variable. That's how you do it.
Yes.
All right. Well,
put one button at a time, and then start working on poking multiple buttons.
Exactly. All right. So I think that's a good place to end for the evening. So Dragoon, if you want to put up our contact information.
All right. We can be reached by email at foundryroundtable@live.com. We are also on Twitter at Foundry Roundtab, where you can follow us and find out when we go live or make changes to our schedule or have various announcements made. Drogyn can be reached directly at Drogyn1701. Duncan can be reached at Gorgonups_SSF. Mark can be reached at Markhawkman. And I, of course, can be reached at Greendragoon.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we will say good night.
Good night.
Night.
Good night.